Carrie wasn't just a horror movie about fear and revenge. It was a controlled eruption of pressure, talent, accidents, and choices that nearly broke the people making it. What audiences saw felt polished and inevitable. What they didn't know was how close the film came to collapsing. From chaotic shoots to buried creative decisions, this is the story behind 20 weird facts about Carrie 1976, including endings they almost used, and the one they hid in plain sight. Stay close. Don't blink. Fact 1. Carrie wasn't meant to feel elegant. It was meant to feel wrong. From the first production meeting, the goal isn't beauty, it's discomfort. Brian De Palma pushes the crew to avoid clean horror. No neat scares, no safe rhythm. Camera movements linger too long. Silence stretches past comfort. The visual language refuses reassurance. What audiences didn't know is how deliberate this imbalance is. Blocking feels slightly off. Frames never settle. Nothing looks wrong on paper, yet everything feels uneasy in the dailies. Not chaos, but instability. That discomfort becomes the film's identity. It isn't polished terror, it's pressure. Slow, quiet pressure. And once it starts building, it doesn't release. Fact 2. The opening locker room scene nearly shut the film down. Today it's iconic. During production, it's dangerous. The studio worries about tone, pacing, and audience reaction. The scene is long, quiet, dreamlike. De Palma insists on soft lighting and slow motion, not urgency exposure. Executives push back hard, shorten it, speed it up, reduce the linger. De Palma refuses. He argues the film lives or dies here, not on shock, but vulnerability. Extra hours go into timing and camera movement. Every second matters. Early screenings split viewers. Some are confused, others deeply unsettled. That reaction saves the scene. It works because it leaves audiences unprotected. Fact 3. Sissy Spacek's performance unsettles the set itself. Spacek doesn't perform between takes. She stays quiet, withdrawn, watching, not method preservation. Crew members later say conversations stop when she passes, not from difficulty, but atmosphere. De Palma notices immediately and protects it. Fewer distractions, minimal chatter. What audiences didn't know is how much Carrie's isolation is built off camera. Spacek's posture and timing are restrained. Nothing is exaggerated. That restraint makes the transformation devastating. It isn't rage, it's release. And because the performance never asks for sympathy, it earns it. The set feels the weight first. The audience follows. Fact 4. The mother-daughter dynamic fractures the crew emotionally. These scenes are hard to watch, harder to film. Piper Laurie delivers lines with chilling calm. No shouting, no excess, just certainty. What audiences didn't know is how often filming pauses afterward. Crew members step away, not from fear, from tension. De Palma allows resets, not technical, emotional. The scenes don't feel staged, they feel witnessed. Laurie avoids exaggeration, making the dynamic feel inescapable. Carrie doesn't argue, she absorbs. The house isn't shelter, it's pressure. And as the scenes build, one truth becomes clear. Escape isn't physical, it's psychological. That weight drives everything that follows. Fact 5. The prom sequence nearly collapses under its own ambition. The prom is the film's centerpiece and its biggest risk. Multiple cameras, long tracking shots, hundreds of moving parts. De Palma wants elegance. The camera must glide, not chase. What audiences didn't know is how many rehearsals it takes. Actors hit marks repeatedly. Lighting resets for hours. One mistake ruins the illusion. The prom must feel dreamlike before it turns. That contrast is everything. Chaos too early destroys the impact. So De Palma demands control, precision, calm. The tension comes from anticipation, not motion. When the shift finally happens, it feels inevitable, not sudden, earned. And that's why it devastates. Fact 6. The sound design hides more than it reveals. Carrie isn't loud until it needs to be. Long stretches pass with minimal sound. Footsteps echo. Breathing lingers. Music fades instead of surging. What audiences didn't know is how much restraint goes into this choice. The sound team removes effects that would normally heighten scenes. No constant cues, no obvious signals. The absence creates vulnerability. When sound finally erupts, it feels violent not because it's louder, but because it's been withheld. This approach shapes how viewers react. They lean in, they listen, they wait. And when the moment breaks, it doesn't just scare, it overwhelms. Fact 7. De Palma's camera isn't neutral, it's accusatory. Split screens, long takes, sudden reframing. These aren't stylistic flourishes, they're judgments. De Palma uses the camera to implicate the audience. You aren't just watching events unfold, you're trapped inside them. What audiences didn't know is how intentional this is. The camera often lingers too long on reactions, not action, faces, silence, hesitation. The horror isn't what happens. It's who sees it happen and does nothing. That choice reframes the film. Not a monster story, a witness story. And once you realize that, the film never lets you off the hook. Fact 8. Several scenes are shot to feel unfinished on purpose. Clean cuts are avoided. Movements don't always resolve. Dialogue overlaps. This frustrates some editors early on. It feels wrong. De Palma insists it stays. What audiences didn't know is that this roughness mirrors Carrie's internal state. Nothing in her life concludes cleanly. Conversations stop mid-thought. Comfort never settles. By allowing scenes to feel incomplete, the film mirrors emotional interruption. It's not sloppy, it's strategic. And it creates a sense that nothing is stable even before everything breaks. Fact 9. The violence is staged like choreography, not chaos. Every major moment is planned like a dance. Marks are precise. Timing is strict. What audiences didn't know is how much rehearsal goes into scenes that feel uncontrolled. De Palma believes true shock requires structure. Without it, scenes become noise. The destruction unfolds with rhythm. Pause, release, pause again. That rhythm makes the moments feel heavier, not frantic, inevitable. The horror isn't surprise, it's realization. Fact 10. The film's restraint is its most dangerous weapon. This is where audiences lean forward, where tension peaks without warning. And this is the moment to say, go ahead and like and subscribe, because this fact explains why Carrie still unsettles people decades later. The film doesn't chase shock, it delays it. Every withheld moment sharpens the eventual impact. What audiences didn't know is that restraint is harder than spectacle. It requires confidence, trust, and a willingness to let silence do the work. That choice defines the film's legacy. Fact 11. The film's pacing was almost rewritten in post-production. Early cuts of Carrie move faster. Too fast. Scenes land, then rush forward before the unease can settle. The tension leaks out. Brian De Palma sees it immediately. He doesn't add footage. He subtracts certainty. Scenes are pulled apart. Pauses are stretched. Transitional beats are removed entirely. What audiences didn't know is how close the film comes to losing its slow burn identity. Studio notes push for momentum. De Palma pushes back with restraint. He understands that fear isn't built by speed, but by delay. Every second becomes deliberate. Silence is allowed to breathe. Reactions are held longer than comfort allows. The final pacing feels natural because it's engineered. The result isn't ease, it's anticipation, and anticipation becomes the film's true engine. Fact 12. Test audiences reacted with silence, not screams. Executives expect noise, gasps, audible shock. They don't get it. Instead, test audiences sit motionless, quiet, processing. Some don't speak when the lights come up. That reaction alarms studio voices. Is the film connecting at all? Brian De Palma argues that it is. Silence, he says, means absorption. Fear doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it freezes the body instead. What audiences didn't know is how rare that reaction is and how powerful. Loud responses fade quickly. Stillness lingers. The film isn't bouncing off viewers, it's sinking into them. That silence becomes proof that Carrie has gone deeper than surface terror. It isn't provoking screams. It's leaving an imprint, and once it's inside the viewer, it doesn't leave easily. Fact 13. Several character moments were trimmed to preserve mystery. Early versions of Carrie explain more. Backstories are clearer. Motivations are verbalized. Emotional logic is spelled out. Brian De Palma removes most of it. What audiences didn't know is how many clarifying lines end up on the cutting room floor. He believes explanation weakens impact. The more viewers understand, the safer they feel. Confusion keeps them exposed. Characters are allowed to contradict themselves. Reactions go unexplained. Silence replaces dialogue. This choice frustrates some viewers and defines the film. Carrie doesn't narrate her feelings. She carries them. The audience isn't guided. It's left alone with implication. That uncertainty becomes unsettling. Not everything makes sense, and that discomfort mirrors the character's inner world. The film refuses to explain itself, and because of that, it stays with you. Fact 14. The lighting design tells a secret story. At first, Carrie looks almost gentle. Warm tones dominate moments of safety. Soft light fills familiar spaces. Then, gradually, something shifts. Cooler shadows creep in unnoticed. Corners darken. Faces lose warmth. What audiences didn't know is how precisely this transition is planned. Lighting isn't just atmosphere, it's narrative. Safety fades without announcement. There's no single moment where the world turns hostile. It just slowly becomes unfamiliar. By the time darkness fully arrives, it feels inevitable, natural, too natural. The visual shift mirrors Carrie's emotional journey. Hope doesn't disappear suddenly. It drains away. And because the audience isn't warned, they don't resist it. They accept the darkness as normal. That quiet visual manipulation makes the final act feel earned and deeply unsettling. Fact 15. The film avoids easy villains. No one in Carrie announces themselves as cruel. There are no exaggerated performances, no obvious monsters. Cruelty appears casually, thoughtlessly, almost routine. What audiences didn't know is how intentional this choice is. Brian De Palma understands that obvious menace creates distance. Everyday harm does the opposite. It feels familiar, dismissible, dangerous. Characters hurt others without ceremony, without drama, and that's what makes it disturbing. The film refuses to let viewers say, "That could never happen here." It insists the opposite. This story isn't about rare evil. It's about ordinary neglect and quiet unkindness. That universality gives Carrie its staying power. The threat isn't a villain, it's a pattern, and patterns are harder to escape. Fact 16. Carrie's power is never celebrated. In another film, power would feel like release, victory, control. Carrie rejects that entirely. There's no triumph here. No catharsis. What looks like dominance is actually collapse. Brian De Palma guards this choice fiercely. What audiences didn't know is how often the temptation arises to make the moment feel empowering. It's resisted every time. Carrie's power isn't freedom, it's consequence, heavy, unavoidable. The more control she appears to gain, the more isolated she becomes. The film refuses to frame her abilities as wish fulfillment. They don't solve anything, they end everything. That distinction matters. The story isn't about becoming powerful. It's about what happens when pressure finally breaks. And once it does, there's no celebration, only fallout. Fact 17. The destruction is framed as loss, not spectacle. The camera never cheers. It doesn't chase excitement. It watches, faces, reactions, the stillness after impact. What audiences didn't know is how deliberately Brian De Palma avoids visually cool angles during the destruction. He isn't interested in thrill. He's interested in aftermath. The lens lingers on what's left behind, not what explodes. That choice reframes the climax entirely. This isn't victory. It's damage. The scale doesn't feel grand. It feels empty. By refusing spectacle, the film denies the audience emotional release. There's nothing to enjoy, only consequences to witness. That restraint makes the ending heavier. The destruction doesn't exhilarate, it settles. And it leaves behind a sense of irreversible loss that defines the film's final tone. Share 18. The film's final movements were rewritten multiple times. Late into production, the ending still isn't settled. Different structures are tested, emotional beats rearranged. What audiences didn't know is how uncertain the final act remains, almost until the end. Some versions feel too neat, others too punishing. Some explain too much, others say too little. None feel right. So the team begins removing instead of adding. Fewer answers, fewer explanations, simpler construction, stranger rhythm. The goal shifts from resolution to unease. The ending doesn't need to conclude the story, it needs to echo it. By stripping the final moments down to their emotional core, the film finds its shape, not clarity, but resonance. The ending doesn't close the experience, it destabilizes it, and that decision defines the film's lasting impact. Fact 19. The famous final scare isn't the original idea. Early concepts aim for closure, emotional finality, a sense of narrative completion. They don't work. Brian De Palma pushes instead for something unresolved, ambiguous. What audiences didn't know is how controversial this choice is during production. Ambiguity risks confusion, it risks frustration, but it also lingers. The final scare isn't designed to shock once, it's designed to repeat in memory. It doesn't explain what happens next. It interrupts. The film refuses to end cleanly, and that refusal becomes iconic. Viewers leave the theater unsettled, not satisfied. The fear doesn't stay on screen, it follows them. That lingering uncertainty becomes part of the film's identity. Not an ending, but an afterimage. Fact 20. The ending they chose wasn't the ending they filmed. Multiple hidden endings are explored. Some clearer, some harsher, some unexpectedly quiet. None survive. What audiences didn't know is that the final version is chosen precisely because it denies comfort. It explains nothing. It resolves nothing. It turns the fear inward instead of outward. The nightmare doesn't conclude. It pauses. That choice is deliberate. The film doesn't want relief. It wants memory. By refusing to seal the story shut, Carrie ensures it stays open in the viewer's mind. The terror doesn't end when the screen goes dark. It echoes. That's why the film endures. It doesn't close the door on its audience. It leaves it slightly ajar and lets the unease seep through. Carrie endures not because of what it shows, but because of what it withholds. A film about pressure, about watching, about what happens when silence finally breaks. If this pulled back the curtain on something you didn't know, stay curious, stay observant, and remember sometimes the quietest moments are the ones that change everything.